of the deep ties that bind the two democracies together. Today's speech is not the first for a President Herzog to Congress. In fact, the president's father, Chaim Herzog, Israel's sixth president, delivered a speech to a joint session in 1987 as Israel celebrated 40 years of its independence. Today, President Isaac Herzog will speak about the strength of the U.S.-Israel partnership at 75 years. And Michael Herzog, the president's brother and Israel's ambassador to the United States, will also be in attendance. In a few moments, we'll see the House chamber packed with the overwhelming majority of Democrats and Republicans in Congress, who are attending this special event in strong support for the U.S.-Israel relationship. Leadership from both sides of the aisle have spoken out in anticipation of this address. And yesterday, in an overwhelming vote of 412 to 9, the House reaffirmed its bipartisan support for Israel while rejecting the false claims that Israel is a racist or apartheid state. That strong bipartisan support can never be taken for granted. And it's up to each of us, through our work with AIPAC, to ensure pro-Israel friends in Congress have strong, consistent political support from our community. President Herzog's visit comes at a time when the U.S.-Israel alliance is paramount for the security of both nations. Today, the Iranian regime is digging in deeper on its nuclear weapons program, its support for terrorist groups on Israel's borders, and its growing partnerships with Russia and China. Whether in the West Bank, in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, or inside Israel itself, Iran is orchestrating terrorism against Israel from all sides. America's support for Israel and the security funding we lobby for together are vital to ensuring Israel has the resources it needs to protect its citizens. President Herzog will likely touch on each of these topics in his speech, and so joining me now to preview his remarks are Dr. Cameron Brown, Director of AIPAC AIEF in Jerusalem, and Deborah Saxon, AIPAC's Deputy Director of Policy and Government Affairs. Thank you both so much for being with us this morning. We have a lot to look forward to.
Thanks for having us, Corey. It's great to be here.
Deb, why don't we start with you? Give us a sense of the significance of this moment, a joint speech to a joint session of Congress from Israel's President Herzog. How should we be interpreting the significance of this moment?
Yeah, so, a joint session of Congress is a rare and special thing. This is not something that happens every day on the floor of the House of Representatives. But today has layered meaning beyond that. Like you said, Corey, this family, the Herzog family, if there was royalty in Israel, this family would qualify. His grandfather was Israel's first chief rabbi of Israel. His father, who was a president of Israel and stood in this exact chamber for Israel's 40th anniversary. Having his brother there, who is today's Israel's ambassador to the U.S. It's a remarkable thing to have President Herzog address us today. But it's more than a speech. The significance of this is really, if you look back at how even this came to be, it was about a year ago. Then Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer invited President Herzog to address a joint session in anticipation of Israel's 75th anniversary and a celebration. This was before the U.S. elections, before the Israeli elections, really thinking forward and thinking, this is beyond politics and beyond personalities. We want to showcase the enduring bipartisan friendship between our countries and do something very special. And so today's speech, a lot of intention, a lot of planning that went into it, but it's a demonstration of that very, very special relationship.
Absolutely. We have a lot to look forward to today, and we're going to be anticipating the speech and breaking it down later as well. Cameron, I want to turn to you. You've been following these developments and the anticipation of the speech and the lead up to today. What's the purpose of President Herzog's visit, and what's he hoping to achieve?
Let's first remember that the president is a little different than the president in the United States. It is mostly a symbolic function. Its role is mostly to try to unify the country around core issues in which there's consensus. And so his main goal, first and foremost, is to underscore the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship, even when we understand that there is tension between the two governments. And so that's what you've seen so far in his visit. And I think that if anything we walk away with at the end of this visit is to underscore, despite the tension, that these two countries are still extraordinarily close and their relationship very strong. It will be a very successful trip.
The trip has already been underway for over a day. Yesterday, President Herzog was in the Oval Office meeting with President Biden. He also had a meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. More meetings are scheduled today with Vice President Harris, and he also met with Jake Sullivan earlier today. Cameron, what can you tell us about each of those meetings? We know there were some announcements made earlier, and there will be more announcements about joint partnerships later in the day. What can you share with us?
So first of all, it's noteworthy just that we've had these meetings. It's a series of all the top leadership in the administration, and that does not happen every day. The fact that everyone cleared their calendar to underscore the relationship, the tight relationship between these two countries, in and of itself is the most important statement. Again, if we look at the main issues that have been discussed, there's not going to be a lot of surprises, especially to our folks. It's the core issues that the two governments always discuss. Iran, its nuclear program, its malign regional activities, what to do about the Palestinian situation, especially all the terrorism emanating out of Jenin and Nablus. What do we do about the northern border? There's a lot of provocations on the part of Hezbollah. What do we do about that? Visa waiver. We're very, very close right now to having an enormously important breakthrough on visa waiver. How do we make sure we get that over the goal line? And so there are a whole list of issues. The one interesting, I think, announcement that we're going to see here is with the vice president. And that is going to be, I think, one clear thing where we're going to see an announcement based on a program here where the two countries are going to advance climate-related issues, especially in the field of ag tech. So that I think is going to be the key thing, but that is just, again, one in a long series of issues that the two countries always discuss. The last thing to think about in this context is that this is the most senior Israeli government official to come actually since the elections in November. And so there's a lot really baked into these meetings, a lot of important issues, again, issues that our organization also delves in every day. And so he is also advancing this work in the same way, to be honest, that we do.
Well, we'll be looking out for each of those important announcements, including the one you just mentioned with the vice president. It's only Wednesday morning. It's already been a very busy week on Capitol Hill, especially related to our issue and the U.S.-Israel relationship. A lot of response coming from the leadership in Congress from both parties in response to Congresswoman Jayapals' remarks over the weekend. What can you tell us, Deb, about what that response has been like?
Yeah, so I mean, in the category of you just can't make this stuff up, and the timing of all of this too, very unfortunate statements, to say the least, by the Congresswoman over the weekend, where she called Israel a racist state. Importantly, immediately, the House Democratic leadership came together and put together a statement refuting that, condemning it, saying very clearly that Israel is not a racist state, and several other things. A very important and quick statement. We also saw lots of members of Congress go to social media and condemn the statement. A group of over 40 Democratic members drafted a coordinated message against these remarks. And then the House leadership brought forward a resolution just yesterday, and using parliamentary procedure, which usually things don't move so quickly in the House, using a procedure that allowed for very quick recognition of that resolution. There was a vote last night on a resolution that said the following. Very simple and straightforward. The state of Israel is not a racist and apartheid state. Congress rejects all forms of anti-Semitism and xenophobia, and that the United States will always remain a staunch ally and supporter of Israel. That resolution got a vote last night of 412 to 9. So an amazing thing that happened in the backdrop of this speech today. A really, truly impressive response.
Absolutely. Obviously, members of Congress are going to be bringing that strong support for Israel into the chamber with them as they hear the speech today. And so a lot of powerful statements coming out of Congress in response to those unfortunate remarks. We also know there's a lot happening on Capitol Hill on our legislative agenda, lots of different bills and initiatives moving forward on the items that we focus on day in and day out at AIPAC. So Deb, maybe you can give us just an update on where we are in the legislative calendar, what are the key bills and pieces of legislation that we're following, and what's the outlook in terms of the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really busy season for Congress. Basically, spring and summer is the crunch time to get as much done as possible. So for anybody who is watching and is getting our action alerts on legislative items and asks, please do reach out to your members and take action when we're asking on all of these different issues, because this is crunch time. There's nothing that is on automatic pilot in the Congress. It requires people actually reach out, weigh in with their members of Congress, and ask for advancement of our initiatives. We're seeing all of the appropriations work, really a whole lot of activity on appropriations, both in the House and in the Senate. Most importantly, the security assistance cooperation, the full $3.3 billion with no political conditions attached. This just moved through House committee last week. It's actually expected to be marked up in the Senate committee tomorrow. This is the bread and butter of our work, in addition to so many other important pieces that play into the appropriations pieces. There's the defense cooperation portfolio, which is part of the National Defense Authorization Act. That moved in the House last week. It's happening on the floor of the Senate. Once all of these senators leave the Herzog speech, they'll go back to the Senate to continue their work on the NDAA. This includes the important missile defense cooperation that we work on, the $500 million in programs for Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow. There's all kinds of new programs that we're also looking to advance this year. We've set up a whole new program looking at the future of warfare, a dedicated stream of funding so that the United States and Israel can work together to meet future threats. AI, cybersecurity. We've seen in the past on other programs like the tunnel detection technology, the counter UAV programs, both programs that will be continuing and having some increases on the counter UAV program. When the United States and Israel come together to work on these kinds of programs and share their ingenuity and research and all the we have good things that come from that. And so there's all kinds of new programs happening there. Abraham Accords legislation, to Cameron's earlier remarks on visa waiver program. A lot of focus in the last couple of weeks, really getting the Senate to speak in a bipartisan fashion about the support for Israel's entry into the visa waiver program, which will have great benefits to both countries. So I'm only touching on the generalities here. So much happening right now in Congress, and only more to come too.
There's so much that you just mentioned, and I want to actually follow up on a couple of points you made about some of these provisions. So you mentioned tunnel detection technology. This is one of those that AIPAC's been focused on for many years. This was important, critically important, life-saving technology that helped prevent attacks against Israel going back almost a decade now. But Cameron, you've talked a little bit about the importance of this tunnel detection technology. Maybe you can say a couple of words on how we saw this technology being used just a couple of weeks ago, a couple months ago, really, in May.
So first of all, I need to remind people that one of the key bits of our work is to bring members of Congress and their staff to Israel. And in that trip, without question, one of the most powerful moments is when they go 18 floors underneath the ground, underneath the Earth's surface, and into the depths of a Hezbollah attack tunnel. And it's right at the northern border in Zone 8. And sometimes when you're about to walk in, there's a Hezbollah operative off to the side taking your picture. Frankly, it's a little unnerving. But everybody who walks out of that tunnel walks out a changed person. And when we explain that the ability of the IDF to find those tunnels is totally linked to American aid in developing tunnel detection, they understand the incredible implications of, frankly, our work and what our organization and what our activists are doing, but also what the U.S. Congress has really been putting an emphasis on for so many years. Lately, what we've been finding out is that that work did not end with just discovering these attack tunnels. And it's, without getting into too much detail on this for obvious reasons, that same technology has implications well beyond just the tunnels that they found. And you'll notice that Israel's success in previous operations, in particular in May 2021, but also in this last round of escalation with Gaza, Israel's ability to take out subterranean weapon storages and what was called the underground system of attack tunnels and transportation tunnels inside Gaza that Hamas has used, all of that is now exposed. And again, that ability to not find refuge underground is a game changer and is one of the reasons why we have stability between Hamas and their the rule that they have in Gaza and Israel. While there's been deterrence, they understand they have nowhere to run to and nowhere to hide. And again, this is a direct result of the work that Congress has done, the aid that Congress has done, and again, frankly, the work that our people have been doing so diligently.
So tunnel detection technology, anti-drone cooperation research, another critical piece. We could spend all kinds of time talking about that. I do want to touch on the Abraham Accords because that is a piece that we continue to push. We look to strengthen and expand upon the Accords with various pieces of legislation that are moving. A lot of talk this week about, well, there's a lot of talk about Morocco this week. The IDF just appointed a new defense attaché to Morocco. The kind of the latest breakthrough in the Abraham Accords. We seem to see a story every week or so about how the Accords are expanding. Obviously, the big question is Saudi. Maybe Cameron, I can turn to you. Just kind of give us a state of Israel's relationships with the Abraham Accords countries today, and then what are the prospects on the Abraham Accords in terms of Saudi?
So first of all, I think you mentioned things with Morocco. There have been a number of announcements. There was an announcement by the Moroccan royal court that Israel has recognized its claims in the Sahel. I think what this may also lead to is another breakthrough with Morocco and Israel. I don't know if everyone's aware, but
Cameron, I'm actually going to interrupt you, and we'll come back to you after the speech. I'm being told that President Herzog is entering the House chamber now, so we're going to take a look and see him being greeted by members of Congress. A warm reception for President Herzog here, and why don't we go ahead and take you to the speech now. Stay with us after the speech. We'll have a lot to break down following his remarks. Enjoy the speech, everyone, and we'll see you again in a few minutes.
Members of the Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor to present to you His Excellency Isaac Herzog, President of the State of Israel.
Madam Vice President, Mr. Speaker, on November 10th, 1987, I was sitting at home with my wife Michal, expecting our first child. We were watching the first Israeli president invited to address a joint session of Congress in honor of Israel's 40th Independence Day. That president was my father. Standing here today, representing the Jewish Democratic State of Israel in its 75th year, at the very podium from which my late father, President Chaim Herzog, spoke, is in the honor of a lifetime, and I thank you wholeheartedly for it. I was born and raised in Israel, but my father's diplomatic post at the United Nations brought my family to New York in the 1970s. During high school, I volunteered with the Legal Aid Society for the Elderly in Brooklyn, New York. I volunteered with the impoverished and the underprivileged elderly, including war veterans and Holocaust survivors who gave their best years to the country they loved. My mentor at the organization was a subtle, reserved professional. She was strictly business. The moment she broke character has remained with me for almost 50 years. It was the day she told me the love of her life died fighting for Israel. Her fiancé, a tall, bright American Jewish boy, was inspired by the Zionist dream and the Jewish people's desire for independence. He voluntarily boarded a ship to Haifa, fought in the Israeli military, and fell in the battle for Israel's independence just weeks before their wedding. Although decades had gone by and she rebuilt her life, the cracks in her heart remained. That moment in which I learned of the life he gave for the State of Israel spoke to the very core of the bond forged between the people of the United States and the people of Israel. How the nations we built overcame loss. How deeply our stories complement each other's. How far we have all come together. Speaker McCarthy, I thank you for hosting this festive joint session of Congress celebrating the first 75 years of Israel's independence. Just a few weeks ago, during your first trip abroad as Speaker, you honored the Israeli people by addressing the Knesset in Jerusalem, the capital of the State of Israel and the Jewish people. Your sincere expression of friendship on behalf of the United States of America truly resonated with the Israelis. Thank you. Vice President Harris, it is such a great pleasure to see you again. I vividly recall hosting you at the Knesset a few years back. Your stirring remarks at the Israeli Embassy's Independence Day reception a few weeks ago reflect both yours and President Biden's decades-long ironclad friendship with Israel. Special thanks go to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who first invited me less than a year ago, together with Senator Chuck Schumer. And special thanks to dear friends, Senate Minority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell and House Minority Leader Congressman Hakeem Jeffries for this bipartisan, bicameral invitation. And my thanks also to the distinguished members of the Escort Committee for greeting me so beautifully. Mr. Speaker, dear friends, in Jewish weddings, a glass is placed on the ground, intentionally stomped on. This ritual evokes the destruction of our temple in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. Only after the glass is broken, the celebration can truly begin. Amidst the most joyous occasions in the lives of two individuals who have come together to build something whole, we recall what was once broken in our nation. Thus, the bitter blends with the sweet. Today, the Hebrew calendar points to the first day of the month of Av. In Jewish tradition, this is a somber period in which we mourn the loss of our sovereignty. Jewish communities all over the world lament the beginning of our national exile, where throughout 2 millennia we continuously expressed a spiritual connection to our ancestral homeland, a longing to return home and regain our independence. Yet today, at this moment in my people's history, gathering on Capitol Hill to celebrate 75 years of Israeli independence with our greatest partner and friend, the United States of America, my soul is overflowing with pride and joy. The people of Israel are grateful to no end for the ancient promise fulfilled and for the friendship we have forged. In 1949, the President of the United States of America, Harry S. Truman, met with the chief rabbi of the newly established State of Israel, my grandfather, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog, in the Oval Office. This was just a few years after each of them pleaded and campaigned for the rescue of Europe's Jews being slaughtered in the Holocaust by the Nazis. In speaking to President Truman, Rabbi Herzog thanked him for being the first world leader to officially recognize the State of Israel 11 minutes after its foundation. He spoke, Rabbi Herzog, of the divine providence that destined President Truman to help bring about the rebirth of Israel after 2,000 years of exile. Witnesses of the encounter recalled tears running down President Truman's cheeks. We're honored to have President Truman's grandson, Clifton Truman Daniel, with us here today. When the State of Israel was established in 1948, the land which the Almighty promised Abraham, to which Moses led the Israelites, the land of the Bible, of milk and honey, evolved into an exquisite land of democracy. Against all odds, the Jewish people returned home and built a national home which became a beautiful Israeli democracy, a mosaic of Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze and Circassians, secular, traditional, and Orthodox, of all denominations, of all possible views and lifestyles. A land which welcomed the ingathering of exiles from over 100 nations. A land which became the startup nation, a bustling hub of innovation and creativity, social action and intellectual discovery, spiritual awakening and business ventures, scientific ingenuity, and life-saving medical breakthroughs. We built a nation-state which has faced relentless war, terror, and delegitimization since its birth. A country fighting to defend itself from enemy and foe, yet whose citizens continue to greet each other with the word peace, shalom. A country which takes pride in its vibrant democracy, its protection of minorities, human rights and civil liberties as laid down by its parliament, the Knesset, and safeguarded by its strong Supreme Court and independent judiciary. A state founded on complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or gender, as stipulated explicitly in Israel's Declaration of Independence. A country which is ever evolving, a diverse amalgam of accents, beliefs, backgrounds, and customs, truly a modern-day miracle. This is the sweetness in which our country has been blessed. However, dear friends, the bitter casts a dark shadow on our country, on our region, and on the world. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the greatest challenge Israel and the United States face at this time together is the Iranian nuclear program. Let there be no doubt, Iran does not strive to attain nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Iran is building nuclear capabilities that pose a threat to the stability of the Middle East and beyond. Every country or region controlled or infiltrated by Iran has experienced utter havoc. We have seen this in Yemen, in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq. In fact, we have seen this in Iran itself, where the regime has lost its people and is suppressing them brutally. Iran has spread hatred, terror, and suffering throughout the Middle East and beyond, adding fuel to the disastrous fire and suffering in Ukraine. Iran is the only nation on the planet publicly calling, plotting, and developing means to annihilate another nation, a member of the family of nations, the State of Israel. Israel has no border with Iran. Israel has no resources contested by Iran. Israel has no conflict with the Iranian people. And yet, the Iranian regime, together with its proxies throughout the Middle East, is aiming and working towards destroying the State of Israel, killing the Jews, and challenging the entire world, the entire free world. Allowing Iran to become a nuclear threshold state, whether by omission or by diplomatic commission, is unacceptable. The world cannot remain indifferent to the Iranian regime's call to wipe Israel off the map. Tolerating this call and Iran's measures to realize it is an excusable moral collapse. Backed by the free world, Israel and the United States must act forcefully together to prevent Iran's fundamental threat to international security. I am here to reiterate what every Israeli leader has declared for decades. The State of Israel is determined to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapon capabilities. Mr. Speaker, we are proud to be the United States' closest partner and friend. We are grateful to the United States for the necessary means you have provided us to keep our qualitative military edge and to enable us to defend ourselves by ourselves. This reflects your ongoing commitment to Israel's security. We are also tremendously proud that ours is a two-way alliance in which Israel has been making critical contributions to the national security interests of the United States of America in numerous ways. Thank you, dear members of Congress, for your support of Israel throughout history and at this critical moment in time. Mr. Speaker, there is no question that the peace which the United States brokered between Israel and its neighbors has revolutionized the Middle East. The historic peace treaties with the Arab Republic of Egypt and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan have demonstrated the many blessings of opting out of the cycle of war. Both Jordan and Egypt have contributed tremendously to solidifying the precious peace and enhancing our region's stability and well-being. 3 years ago, the Abraham Accords realigned our imaginations and our nation and our region. Israel eagerly welcomed the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and the Kingdom of Morocco into an exclusive warm peace between our peoples. Since signing the accords, over 1 million Israelis have visited the Abrahamic nations, a clear expression of our will to become integrated in the region. This is a peace anchored in trust, hope, and prosperity, a true game changer. Each of these historic agreements, which have altered the trajectory of the Middle East, was facilitated by our greatest friends, the United States of America. Israel's hand is extended and our heart is open to any partner in peace, near or far. Israel thanks the United States for working towards establishing peaceful relations between Israel and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a leading nation in the region and in the Muslim world. We pray for this moment to come. This would be a huge sea change in the course of history in the Middle East and the world at large. My deep yearning, Mr. Speaker, is for Israel to one day make peace with our Palestinian neighbors. Over the years, Israel has taken bold steps towards peace and made far-reaching proposals to our Palestinian neighbors. However, true peace cannot be anchored in violence, notwithstanding the deep political differences and the numerous challenges that surround the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and relations, and I do not ignore them, it should be clear that one cannot talk about peace while condoning and legitimizing terror implicitly or explicitly. True peace cannot be anchored in violence. Palestinian terror against Israel or Israelis undermines any possibility for a future of peace between our peoples. Israelis are targeted while waiting for buses, while taking a stroll on the promenade, while spending time with their family. At the same time, successful terror attacks are celebrated, terrorists are glorified, and their families are financially rewarded for every Israeli they attack. This is inconceivable. It is a moral disgrace. Terror is not a bump in the road. Terror is hatred and bloodshed. It contradicts humanity's most basic principles of peace. Israel cannot and will not tolerate terror, and we know that in this we are joined by the United States of America. Two Israeli soldiers, Oron Shaul and Hadar Goldin, and two civilians, Hisham al-Said and Avera Mengistu, are being held hostage by Hamas for years for the sole purpose of torturing their families, the families they left behind. Lieutenant Hadar Goldin was abducted in violation of a UN-sponsored humanitarian ceasefire negotiated by the United States. His family has been fighting for 9 years to bring him home. I asked Hadar Goldin's mother, Leah, to be with us here today. We pray for her son's return, as well as the 3 other Israelis. We pray for the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy. Nation shall not take up sword against nation, neither shall they know war anymore. The younger generation of Israelis and Palestinians deserve better. They are all worthy of a future to look towards, a future of peace and prosperity, a future of hope, and I'm wholeheartedly committed to this vision, a vision of hope and peace, true peace, without any terror. Mr. Speaker, dear friends, the sacred bond we share is unique in scope and quality because it is based on values that reach across generations, across administrations, across governments and coalitions, carrying us through times of turmoil and elation. 160 years ago, it was President Abraham Lincoln who spoke of the dream to restore the Jews to their national home as one shared by many Americans. The inscription on Philadelphia's Liberty Bell articulates the Hebrew Bible's code of ethics. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. This verse from Leviticus, shining through the crack of the Liberty Bell, underscores the principles that fuel the American dream. These words have bound our nation through the ages. Coming together today in this chamber of liberty and freedom, we are all realizing the hopes of our founding fathers and mothers. We are very proud, so very proud, of the true friendship we have forged, a mutually beneficial partnership that has withstood challenges and weathered great disagreements because it is based not on uniformity of approach, but on the ultimate currency of trust. It is not dependent upon operating in harmony, but on the history we share, on the truths we cherish, on the values we embody. This partnership is based also on similarities and the affinity between our peoples, the courageous immigrants and the trailblazing pioneers. It is rooted deep in our respective declarations of independence. In the American Declaration of Independence, the founders appealed to the supreme judge of the world. In the Israeli Declaration of Independence, influenced by America's, our founders placed their trust in the Rock of Israel, Tzur Israel. The revered American Jewish spiritual leader, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, embodied the bridge between our peoples and the story of American Jewry. After escaping from the Holocaust, Rabbi Heschel publicly advocated interfaith dialogue. He fought for civil liberties in America and marched alongside Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the historic march from Selma to Montgomery in March of 1965. Rabbi Heschel wrote, "To be is to stand for. To be is to stand for." I'm so pleased to have his daughter, Professor Susanna Heschel of Dartmouth, joining us here today. Thank you, Susanna. Susanna, your father reminds us that the principles we defend make us what we are. Ultimately, Israel and the United States stand, and indeed have always stood, for the same values. Our two nations are both diverse, life-affirming societies that stand for liberty, equality, and freedom. At our core, both our peoples seek to repair the cracks in the world. Having said this, I'm really well aware that our world is changing. A new generation of Israelis and Americans are assuming leadership roles, a generation that was not privy to the hardship of Israel's formative years, a generation that is less engaged in the roots that connect our peoples, a generation that perhaps takes for granted the US-Israel relationship. Yet, at this moment, I am optimistic, because to me it is clear that the shift in generations does not reflect changing values, nor does it indicate changes in our interests. When the United States is strong, Israel is stronger. And when Israel is strong, the United States is more secure. Today, my dear friends, we are provided the opportunity to reaffirm and redefine the future of our relationship. Each of us here has a decisive role in the future we are building. Many of the challenges Israel and the United States face are similar. We are all experiencing a tumultuous shift in balance, evident in countless areas. Geopolitical unrest, big power competition, catastrophic war in Ukraine, pandemics, climate crisis, the unknown of artificial intelligence, energy shortages, food insecurity, scarcity of water and desertification, global terror, social polarization, and the attempts to destabilize democracy. Each of these challenges present an opportunity to seek out solutions together, which will benefit the global community. Israel has the ability to contribute in a unique, significant fashion to addressing these challenges. Israel and the United States are world leaders in aiding countries whose peoples have suffered. Our collaborative capabilities, coupled with our mutual beneficial partnership, are the key to the future of our children. To us, it is clear that America is irreplaceable to Israel and Israel is irreplaceable to America. It is time to design the next stage of our evolving friendship and our growing partnership together. So let's do it together, ladies and gentlemen. Let's elevate our partnership to new levels. Mr. Speaker, I'm not oblivious to criticism among friends, including some expressed by respected members of this House. I respect criticism, especially from friends, although one does not always have to accept it. But criticism of Israel must not cross the line into negation of the State of Israel's right to exist. Questioning the Jewish people's right to self-determination is not legitimate diplomacy, it is anti-Semitism. Vilifying and attacking Jews, whether in Israel, in the United States, or anywhere else in the world, is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a disgrace in every form, and I commend President Joe Biden for laying out the United States' first ever national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Dear friends, it's no secret that over the past few months, the Israeli people have engaged in a heated and painful debate. We have been immersed in voicing our differences and revisiting and renegotiating the balance of our institutional powers in the absence of a written constitution. In practice, the intense debate going on back home, even as we speak, is the clearest tribute to the fortitude of Israel's democracy. Israel's democracy has always been based on free and fair elections, on honoring the people's choice, on safeguarding minority rights, on protection of human and civil liberties, and on a strong and independent judiciary. Our democracy is also 120 members of Knesset, comprised of Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, representing every opinion under the Israeli sun, working and debating side by side. Our democracy is also late Friday afternoon, when the sound of the muezzin calling to prayer blends with a siren announcing the Sabbath in Jerusalem, while on one of the largest and most impressive LGBTQ Pride parades in the world is going on in Tel Aviv. Our democracy is also reflected in protesters taking to the streets all across the country to emphatically raise their voices and fervently demonstrate their points of view. Our democracy is the blue and white Israeli flag, waved and loved by all Israelis taking part in the debate. I am well aware of the imperfections of Israeli democracy, and I'm conscious of the questions posed by our greatest of friends. The momentous debate in Israel is painful and deeply unnerving because it highlights the cracks in the whole, within the entire whole. And as President of Israel, I am here to tell the American people and each of you that I have great confidence in Israeli democracy. Although we are working through sour issues, just like you, I know our democracy is strong and resilient. Israel has democracy in its DNA. I am deeply mindful of the challenge which this moment presents to Israeli society, and I've made it the priority of my presidency to play a leading role in this critical and emotional public discussion. I will say to you, dear friends, in English, what I've said to my people, my sisters and brothers in Hebrew back home. As a nation, we must find a way to talk to each other, no matter how long it takes. As head of state, I will continue doing everything to reach broad public consensus and to preserve, protect, and defend the state of Israel's democracy. Dear friends, for so many Israelis, this very public debate is also very personal. It is now a little after 6 p.m. in Israel. They will sit down to dinner together besides family or friends with whom they may severely disagree, but they are and they will always remain family. Israel and the United States will inevitably disagree on many matters, but we will always remain family. Our revolutionary societies have so much to give to the world and so much to learn from each other. Our bond may be challenged at times, but it is absolutely unbreakable. The Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, is a song of hope. The late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks wrote that in Judaism, hope is an active virtue which requires a great deal of courage. Hope is the belief that together we can make the world better, that we can overcome any setback and heal the fractures in our world. Israel's first 75 years were rooted in an ancient dream. Let us base our next 75 years on hope, our shared hope that we can heal our fractured world as the closest of allies and friends. Thank you, members of both houses, for celebrating Israel's independence. Am Yisrael Chai.
Bye. Wow.
God bless the state of Israel and God bless the United States of America.
Wow.
We are live in Washington, D.C., following a historic speech from President Isaac Herzog to a joint session of Congress. Really a raucous House chamber. That was an amazing speech for us to watch and for all of us to take in. In a moment, I'll be joined by two members of Congress who were in the chamber to witness the speech, Congressman Don Bacon, a Republican from Nebraska, and Congressman Jared Golden, a Democrat from Maine. But first, I want to get some initial reactions to what we just saw. Back with me are Deborah Saxon and Cameron Brown, who's on the phone. Deb, let me start with you. What was your reaction to what we just watched?
So first of all, I'm a little verklempt, actually. I don't know what I was expecting, but like that was just wow. That was incredible. It was such a moving speech. He did not hold back. There was just for this to end with a standing ovation with him saying Am Yisrael Chai, and the entire chamber up on their feet was just incredible. He just brought in so many moving, emotional pieces, and I don't know if you took account, but there were just, it seemed like every other line was an applause line, including the fact that he really didn't shy away from leaning into the hard stuff, to the criticisms and the moment that we're in right now in Israel with the domestic politics and everything else. I just thought I'm really moved by that speech.
As we touched on in the open, obviously this is a personal issue for the president, a long family tradition and legacy. He spoke about his father, Chaim Herzog, delivering an address as president honoring the 40th anniversary. We'd have to go back and look at the footage to see the kind of reception he got. This is really incredible to watch.
It's really amazing to see also like how he is just welcomed by everyone. You're seeing members of Congress flocking to take pictures with him, greet him. In the chamber, of course, I actually saw several members of Congress. It looked like they had tears in their eyes at some of the moments. Hugs, such a warm welcome, House and Senate, Republican, Democrat. He must be feeling just incredibly, incredibly proud at this moment.
Cameron, I know you're with us in Jerusalem. What were your initial reactions to the speech on your end?
I just echo, first of all, what Deb said. I thought it was an excellent speech. A lot of the key themes that we would hope were in fact there. He talked about the key things, the ancient connection of the people of Israel to the land of Israel, core democratic values, the enduring bonds, key things that they need to be said, and I thought he said them very, very well. I thought it was also very important, though, to see how he addressed some of the key foreign policy challenges that we had and some of the lines he had there. I'll just point out a couple of really key things here. Of course, he put the Iran nuclear issue front and center, and he talked about how is it unacceptable to allow Iran to become a nuclear threshold state, not a nuclear state, a nuclear threshold state. And I thought that was an important bit. And then he went on and said further, by omission or diplomatic commission. In other words, it's not just enough to do something right, or you have to make sure that you don't make a misstep either. And so I thought there were a lot of really key things that we can get into this more, but I thought there were a lot of key issues here they touched on. By the way, Israeli media is reporting that there were about 25 standing ovations to your point before.
Yeah, I think it was a workout if you were in the room.
Definitely.
Just speaking of those who are in the room, every member of Congress, House and Senator, gets one ticket to this event where they can invite a friend, a constituent, to join them up in the galleries. Right now we're seeing a lot of the footage on the floor, but of course the gallery around where we saw him welcome some of the invited guests from his delegation, which that again was such a profound moment to have Leah Golden there, the mother of Hadar Golden, to have
Harry Truman's grandson was there as well. That was an incredible moment.
Incredible. But for these members of Congress who have a ticket and can invite their friends or constituents, this is a really great opportunity to connect with folks. I know I spoke to several members of Congress who were telling me, one invited a rabbi from a small town in Northern California, another, hello, Cameron, welcome back.
Thank you.
A lot of our friends even flying and being here for this special occasion. So it's just really cool to think that everyone gathered for this and were there in the chamber.
Cameron, right when the president was entering the chamber, I cut you off as you were talking about Saudi Arabia and the Abraham Accords. This was a focal point of his speech as well. He mentioning that Saudi Arabia is a leading nation in the region and in the Muslim world. We pray for this moment to come. This would be a huge sea change in the course of history in the Middle East and the world at large. Any other thoughts that you have on the Saudi piece relative to the Abraham Accords?
First of all, it was interesting to see how many members stood up at that applause line. I thought that was very noteworthy. Second, he said something that might just feel like nice prose, but I actually think there's a lot more to it. He talked about how the Abraham Accords realigned our imagination and he said our country and our region. And I think that's really key because a lot of people don't understand the depth of the impact of the Abraham Accords on changing Israeli psyche about the possibility of peace here in the region. I think for a long time there was a question about even if there are peace agreements signed, is that really going to change anything or will it just be a cold peace? And his point here about realigning our imagination, I thought was very, very right on. And talking about the depth of that agreement and peace. The other thing, by the way, that's worth pointing out in that regard, and throughout the speech, he had a few moments where he talked about this, was gratitude. President Herzog expressed gratitude a few times about both QME and specifically about American efforts both to establish the Abraham Accords and to expand them to Saudi Arabia. And I thought that was very, very important and noteworthy.
QME, they're just meaning the
I was just
qualitative
about to
military edge, which is what
Yes,
all of us
thank you.
work so hard to achieve each year through the various legislation and defense programs that we lobby for. I also just, was noteworthy that he did mention those who are critical of Israel. He said, criticism of Israel must not cross a line into negation of the state of Israel's right to exist. That line got a rousing standing ovation. And again, a testament to what we were talking about at the top of the broadcast about the strength of the relationship, the strength of the bipartisanship that's in that room, really in the aftermath of what this week has been, with a few members on the fringe, choosing not to be there and to boycott the speech. This was an overwhelming response from the members of Congress.
Overwhelming, fully bipartisan. Again, looking just at the screen for each one of those standing ovations, it was not like when you watch the State of the Union and one side stands up for one and the other side is sitting. Everybody was getting up. It just felt, you could feel the warmth in the room. You could feel the love. It was palpable. Just incredible. And actually, just to note on his father, because we were talking about this yesterday, the fact that this week you had the Congress on the record against, making very clear that Israel is not a racist or apartheid state. It's eerie, the connection between his father and the speech that he gave at the United Nations against the resolution calling for that Zionism is racism. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background and color on that, Cameron, from the historic speech that President Herzog gave then.
Yeah, if I could suggest, by the way, to anyone who's listening to this, if you haven't ever had a chance to watch or to read the text of his father, then Ambassador Herzog, give this speech. In 1975, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution equating Zionism with racism. And Ambassador Herzog takes to the podium and gives what is probably one of the best speeches in Israeli diplomatic history. It is literally a speech that is studied until today in universities when they teach about the Arab-Israel conflict. It's a fabulous speech, and you heard, interestingly, I happened to reread this speech in preparation here, and you hear echoes of that speech in the speech we heard today. One thing, for instance, that both Herzogs spoke about is that we don't claim that we have a perfect country and that every government policy is ideal, but people whose criticism is about the whether there should be a state at all or the nature of the state, that the state itself is inherently racist, that is crossing a line and really is, at the end of the day, it's anti-Semitic. And I thought both, he drew parallels to his father's speech, and I thought a very important way, in a way that injected into today's discussion very powerfully.
We are just a few moments away. We're expecting a couple of members of Congress who are in the House chamber to join us to get their initial reactions. So we'll keep talking as we wait for them to join us. I do want to touch on a couple other things that the president spoke about. He spoke about Israel's pursuit of peace, reinforcing that notion that Israel is committed to peace with its Palestinian neighbors, lines that also got standing ovations. And he also mentioned the Palestinian Authority's pay-to-slay policy, which continues today, rewarding the families of terrorists who commit attacks against Israelis. So clearly drawing both of those points and the distinction as well between having a viable partner for peace while also acknowledging that they continue these policies.
Again, the rhetoric here I thought was very powerful. He said, terrorism is not a bump on the road to peace. It is a moral outrage. And that sort of moral clarity, I have to tell you, again, people who have been dabbling in Middle East stuff and the conflict for a long time, sometimes you hear people who lose the moral clarity that you just heard. And that point they said they undermines the prospects for peace. That's a critical thing that people need to be reminded of. That this is terrorism. It goes against every value that we have in the West about what it means to respect the sanctity of human life. And he hit that, I thought, rhetorically beautifully.
Yeah, and I think that the response in the room was one, again, where everyone acknowledged and there was standing ovation for those lines there.
Let me come back to the guests who are in the room, because this was a really interesting point. And I'm wondering, Cameron, if you can speak to this from the perspective of Israelis who are watching at home, to see Leah Golden, who's the mother of Hadar Golden, in the House chamber receiving a standing ovation from members of Congress. Unpack that for us. Help us understand kind of the significance of that moment for Israeli viewers at home.
Yeah, I've had a chance to meet the Goldens. And it's a heart-wrenching story. In 2014, towards the end of the operation, 2 soldiers were kidnapped, and Hadar Golden being one of them. And although it appears that the soldiers were killed, Hamas doesn't bother to indicate whether they're alive or dead, to give the bodies back or anything else, because they enjoy, as the president put, terrorizing the families and keeping them in suspense. And it's incredibly cruel, and of course against the Geneva Convention. But what does Hamas care about the Geneva Convention? Leah Golden herself has been out, both in terms of Israeli politicians and global leaders, and you're going to see that again when the President Herzog goes to New York. He's going to meet with the Secretary General. She's going to be in that meeting, and she's going to push him to make sure that something happens on this issue. And so I think seeing her there is very powerful. I'll just give you a little anecdote here, by the way. You will notice that previous Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and I believe also now current Prime Minister Netanyahu have in the background, often when they give their speeches in the office, one of the pictures in the background is a picture of Hadar Golden. So it's something that people try to keep at the front of their mind, that we are still missing 4 Israelis, including 2, by the way, 2 civilians who we believe are still alive. And so it's a very important issue.
Can I actually just want to touch on something that he mentioned, which is the back and forth of members of Congress, a whole lot of members who have traveled to Israel commemorating and celebrating Israel's 75th, including the speech at the Knesset by Speaker McCarthy. How, are you expecting more visits from members of Congress? How are those visits playing out over the course of this year, and also during a time when there's a lot going on in Israel?
Yeah, so we have the great fortune of hosting a large congressional delegation. First in August, we will be hosting a large delegation of freshman Democrats led by Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who was just here in April. And
Cameron,
he is making...
Cameron, I'm going to interrupt you right there, because one of the members of Congress who was just recently in Israel is joining us now from Capitol Hill, Congressman Jared Golden. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. You were just in the House chamber. Would love to hear your reactions to the speech.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's truly a pleasure to join you, and hello to Cameron. Sorry to interrupt there. Those trips are so great, and as you know, I just returned from one with several other House members, both Democrats and Republicans. It was a wonderful trip. But I'll tell you, the speech, I just sent a note to someone who was a part of the team that helped bring us around and welcome us to Israel a few weeks ago, to tell him that the President of Israel are very beautifully represented Israel today before the United States Congress. Left me feeling both warmth and pride in both Israel and the United States of America. And that was the feeling in the room from my perspective. Warmth, I think, for the relationship between our two countries is the best way to describe the feeling on the House floor just a few moments ago.
Obviously, this is a partisan climate in Washington. We've just witnessed a real incredible display of bipartisan support. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that as well, the notion that the U.S.-Israel relationship remains bipartisan with the overwhelming support of Congress.
So, in his speech, President Herzog mentioned perhaps one of his strongest lines. 2 things. One, that when America is strong, Israel is stronger. When Israel is strong, America is more secure. But he also said that for Israel, the United States is irreplaceable. And for the United States, Israel is equally irreplaceable. And I think that those words, very succinct, very straightforward, get right to the heart of the matter. And it is the strong prevailing sentiment of the United States Congress in both the House and the United States Senate. We have our differences, as the President of Israel pointed out. In your own democracy in Israel, you are working through your own differences in society and your politics, and that he noted the same is true in the United States. But this unbreakable, faith and confidence in both of our countries and society's commitment to democracy, which is a strong, shared value and something that binds us together. I think what he said was, it's in our DNA. So you look past these, partisan fights, to the good things that bring you together. And for the United States Congress, And for America at large, one thing that brings us together is our commitment to and support for Israel and the people of Israel.
One final question for you. Congressman, you serve on the House Armed Services Committee. You have an important role in shaping U.S. policy and U.S. foreign policy as it relates to Israel's security and the U.S.-Israel relationship. What are you going to be looking to do in the weeks and months ahead to strengthen that relationship?
Well, of course, we just passed last week our annual defense bill, something that I voted for, as I always have since I came to the United States Congress. And of course, in that bill is always specific funding for the security of Israel. President Herzog thanked the Congress today for giving that military support and financial aid to Israel so that Israel can defend itself. A point that is always strongly made by the people of Israel and the leaders of Israel when members of Congress visit in different delegations, and one that I'm sure will be reiterated to freshman members of Congress when they go there next month. It's an important point to make, and it's something that I'm always proud to support. We talk a lot about Iron Dome, but it goes far beyond that. One thing that I do want to continue to press forward on as we progress with that bill this year or next year, if we're not quite successful, although I think we could be this year, is the creation of something that would be called the U.S.-Israel Future of Warfare Act. This would be a specific line item in our defense bill for joint investments in future technologies and the future of warfare. So think about AI and the challenges and risks of AI, of cyber warfare, use of data in conflict or managing conflict, the troubles of social media and how it can influence the battlefield, anti-tunneling type of challenges, you name it, the list goes on. We were able to get more money towards these types of investments in R&D, but it wasn't specifically, we were not able to create a line item that was solely for the United States and Israel to do this together. So that work continues, and I think it's really important that we be successful, whether we do that this year or next year. I'd like to see it done this Congress.
I just have to interject here for a second because you're being very modest about this, Congressman. You are the Democratic author and lead on this legislation. We're very grateful for that. And so thank you for your leadership. And we will continue to press and support you in this. Just had to clarify for our audience your role in this.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today and for being there.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to AIPAC. Thank you to Israel. And thank you, of course, to the President of Israel for coming today and giving such wonderful remarks and doing just a great job representing Israel. People back in Israel should be very pleased, and it was an honor. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care. As our conversation continues here from Washington, we have another member of Congress who is on the line and will join us now, Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. The congressman was in the room today for the speech and also has been very outspoken recently in support of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. So, Congressman, can you hear us?
And thank you for having me on.
You were just in the House chamber for that speech, and from our vantage point, it was a raucous and extremely supportive crowd. Share a little bit about what it was like from your perspective.
Oops.
I think we're having a bit of trouble with your audio. We'll try to get that back.
We heard you, and now we don't.
Yep. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay. We loved having President Herzog speak to the Congress, and it was I thought, a concise but very strong speech with lots of content. And there were so many strong points to it, and I wrote down what I thought were the highlights. First of all, stressing that Israel is a diverse country in its own right, with obviously Jewish, Muslim, Christian, a lot of different faiths involved. I thought he made a very strong point about Iran, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We need to do everything we can to ensure that they do not have a nuclear weapon. He wants friendship and peace with the Palestinians, but it can't be done because of terrorism. And I think that was such well, just being honest, and it's right. I love the fact that he made a strong comment that the United States is not replaceable. We have to be leaders, and we have to support Israel, but we're also irreplaceable in the world. And I think a lot of Americans have forgot this, and so I really appreciated those comments. And then I love these last 2 points in particular. He said that criticism of Israel is all right. But if you question Israel's right to exist, it's anti-Semitism. I thought that was powerful because we have some folks in our country, but all over the world, who are questioning Israel's right to existence, and that is anti-Semitic. So I thought very powerful. And then he closed by stressing that U.S. and Israel will always be family. We may have differences from here and there, but we'll always be family. I thought it was a tremendous speech. I loved it, and I embrace it.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. And it's been quite the week already as it relates to the U.S.-Israel relationship, and you've been at the center of a lot of this. We saw earlier this week very affirmative statements from Democrats and Republicans in Congress reaffirming the U.S.-Israel relationship, rejecting calls that Israel is a racist state or an apartheid state, and then coming together in such a bipartisan show today on Capitol Hill. Maybe you could share a little bit about what this week was like from your perspective, and kind of the contrast of those two pieces.
We have 435 members of Congress, and we had all but 9 reaffirm our love for Israel and actually call out those comments by one member, actually 2 members now, that talked about apartheid and racism, and we denounced it. All but 9 out of 435. And from my perspective, I like to just make it clear that I support Israel for 3 reasons: practical, moral, and spiritual. Practical, because this is a win-win relationship for both countries, and Israel shares our values. It's a democracy, the only democracy in the region, and it's a win-win for both of our nations. It's moral because we've had thousands of years of anti-Semitism and people murdering Jewish people and making them second-class citizens. So Israel is a safe haven for Jews all over the world, and so it's a moral reason for that existence. And I think it's also spiritual, whether it's the Torah or our Old Testament. On the Christian side, it is clear that those who bless Israel will be blessed, and I want America to stay blessed, and we have been blessed.
Well, Congressman, thank you for your continued leadership in Congress, for your vote this week to affirm the U.S.-Israel relationship, and for all you do to strengthen the ties between the 2 countries. Thanks for being with us today.
My honor and my privilege. Thank you.
We have just a few minutes. I know Cameron is still with us, and I cut him off for the 2nd time today as we were breaking to other speakers. So maybe, Cameron, if you have just a last thought for us before we close the day.
Yeah, when I hear the president's speech, I have to tell you, I looked at it and I said, it really dovetails so nicely with, frankly, our work and our mission. If you look at the agenda items that we work hard on every single day, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, countering Iran's regional malign activities, calling out the moral problem of terrorism, trying to expand the circle of peace in the Abraham Accords, making it clear to people what Israel actually is instead of this demonized other. It was all in the speech. And I think that really goes to the core of, again, what the things that we are advocating on are all deep within the consensus of Israel. We tend to think that Israel is a highly polarized society now. On judicial reform, it is, but on the vast majority of issues, it actually isn't. And the things that we are advocating day in and day out, as the president himself put forth, those are the core issues. And so I was very heartened by his remarks. I thought it gave me the strength to say, yeah, we have to keep pushing on all the things that we push on, because they are critical for making that relationship stronger between the United States and Israel, and for making both countries safe and secure.
Thank you, Cameron. Deb, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just would also emphasize the fact, and I said this earlier, which is that none of this is on autopilot. You know, these aren't inevitable things that happen year in, year out, get included in bills. You know, it requires work, and it requires constant effort to make sure that, you know, bad things don't get put in, and that good things remain and grow, and that the education process, again, because look at this Congress, you know, nobody who was there when his father spoke to Congress is serving in Congress, that's for sure. You know, but if you look back even one Congress, two Congresses ago, the turnover in Congress is so great that it requires constant effort to educate members, to make sure that they understand the value, the mutual benefits between the countries. And so that's where we come into play.
Well, Deb, thank you. Cameron, thank you. And I want to thank all of you for joining AIPAC for this special coverage of President Herzog's speech to Congress. Today was a strong and unequivocal affirmation of bipartisan support for the U.S.-Israel relationship, which we work so hard to build and sustain year over year. And we know that this support is not a given, as Deb just said. It cannot be taken for granted. And so today, we know there are some who are working to weaken and undermine American support for Israel. They're a small fringe, but they're looking to grow their ranks. And so it's up to all of us to ensure pro-Israel friends in Congress have strong political support from our community, because when they do, Israel is safer and the U.S.-Israel relationship is stronger. So thank you for supporting AIPAC. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for working with us to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. We'll see you soon.